start? Thank you. Please have a seat, everyone. We are going to start. Good morning, colleagues online. I hope you are able to hear us.
Yes, we can hear you, I think.
Okay, thank you very much for confirming. So we'll start with our seminar, and I would like to request our Director Executive, Dr. David Achvarena, to give the welcome remarks, please.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure for me to welcome Daniel Baril, who is a member of our strategic advisory committee, an expert in the field of adult education and lifelong learning. So it's a pleasure for us to welcome him today here for this talk, which will give us, I think, very interesting insights about how AI is actually transforming the field of lifelong learning, including in the health sector. So Daniel, welcome again to the WHO Academy, and please, you have the floor.
First of all, I want really to thank the Academy, WHO Academy, for inviting me. It's really a privilege to be able to share works that we're doing with people from another field. I'm not from the field of health education. I've been studying and looking, analyzing adult education policy for close to 30 years. And 10 years ago, I asked myself a question: what are the emerging practices? What is being transformed by adult education and through adult education? And I started 10 years ago to really document emerging practices. At that time, MOOC, online learning, and the online engineering of education was really in a growth trajectory. And all the engineering of learning was being transformed. We ended up with not only online learning, which is a kind of a traditional way of transferring teaching, but broadcasted through internet around the world. But the engineering itself of learning was being transformed, and we ended up through micro learning, nano learning, and also mobile learning. How the smartphone became a classroom in a sense. But everything changed in November 2023 when OpenAI put online ChatGPT. At that moment, generative AI just burst into our world as individuals, as workers, but also in the field of education. And observing the field of education for many years, I had the impression that people in the traditional sector of education thought that the fourth industrial revolution, robotization, automation, they would not be affected by it. It was the manufacturing sector, the productive force of society that was influenced by it, but not themselves. And I think what AI is showing right now is the education sector is being transformed by the fourth industrial revolution. There is automatization, robotization, etc. And the field of learning design is itself transformed. The learning designer profession is under pressure to reimagine itself. And we kind of live in a parallel world. There's the traditional world of learning, education, in presence, public institution, etc., workplace learning. And more, there's an emerging world, a parallel world of AI. And what I want to do in the next close to 30 minutes of me sharing some thoughts, and after that, I want to open the floor because it's a subject that as individual, as worker, and as citizen, really is confronting and challenging us. It's just to open the floor for question. I picked 5 examples, existing practices of using AI in education. What I try to do, each of them touches a different aspect, dimension of the learning process, from design, analyzing needs, skill gap, etc., to learning management system. So purposely, I use existing practices, not to be on a rhetorical level of the use of AI, but to say that thing exists. You'll see that they're all from the private sector, and it's not a coincidence. The private sector is pushing really hard, the edtech sector, the private edtech sector is pushing really hard the use of AI for good and bad reason, for efficiency, mass production of learning activity, but also to think a new way to design learning. And I'll focus more on that aspect. And with every example, I try to modelize it and slowly reconstruct the puzzle. I'll be presenting each piece as a piece of a puzzle, but I gave myself the responsibility to try to show also the picture being constructed through those examples and how they touch different aspects of learning engineering. That's it. It's always a thing when you do a conference on technology, the simplest part of the technology doesn't work, or that's it. Okay, perfect. So the 5 examples, if I just give you an overview, the first one will talk about how our relation as a learner, our relation to knowledge is being transformed by generative AI. We focus on the generative dimension of AI, but through that generative dimension, there's a new way to modelize knowledge. There's a new way to put knowledge together. And it's a different way than a textbook, a school textbook, where we put all the knowledge we have on a subject matter within a fixed object, or a library of courses where we put knowledge in fixed object that the learner access. With generative AI, we have a different relation to through learning. The second one will be a consequence of that in the perspective of the learner itself, because the relation of the learner to that new way to modelize knowledge is more interactive through prompting. You navigate through prompting your way in a new field of knowledge, new knowledge object, which is the complete knowledge of a field, of a specialty, and maybe in the future of human knowledge from the past. And see. And it's always important with technology to have a human in the loop. And that's the example why, because sometimes it doesn't work. That's a mini editorial along the way. The first example will be about a new way to modelize language. The second example will be how the learner itself interact with that knowledge, specifically through prompting. The third one would be about assessing how we can modelize one's knowledge, one's competencies, and situate a learner profile in relation to a framework, and potentially to all of human knowledge or all of a disciplinary knowledge. The fourth one will be about learning management system. That's an interesting one because we might think that LMS are a very advanced technology, but it's a static one. And some say that generative AI will just push in the bin of history LMS, because you won't need a website. You'll just interact with generative AI. So the generative capacity of AI would be an LMS itself. So it's a very challenging and different proposition. And I'll finish with a more conceptual way in terms of professional development to bring that technology in the workplace. It's the learning in the flow of work perspective, which changes the dynamic. It's not the learner who goes toward the learning resources, it's the learning resources who go toward the learner in real time, on the job, in the perimeters of one's work. And it's another way to reorganize training. What I want to do is just through those emerging practices to illustrate structure and practices to illustrate them. I'll try to highlight what could be application for the health profession, but I'm not in that profession, so be indulgent with me if I appear ignorant of your field. I'm a lifelong learner, so I won't take it personally. And the third one, it's where I try to propose a model, a first version of a model that I try to bring together. I like working with the pieces of puzzle, but I think the challenge is to create the image we have to construct with those pieces. First example, how generative AI, through through the technology, what's being done actually? Large language model are really large language model. They're a model. They're a way to put, to systematize knowledge into an object, a tool, a system, which is the large language model. When we interact with generative AI, we're interacting with systematized knowledge. In the years, the encyclopedic movement proposed a way to systematize knowledge. In the Middle Ages, the Summa was a way to systematize knowledge. In our days, LLM is a way to systematize knowledge. There's a technology layer, but we should not forget that at the front end of it, it's knowledge being systematized. And if you read about the construction of LLM, it starts with a dictionary. Every word of the language base is put in a dictionary, and after that, it's mathematized, and the calculation is being done. A few weeks ago, Duolingo, which is the most prominent edtech in general, but it specializes in languages, announced an AI-first strategy. So Duolingo moved toward AI to produce all the content that they had. And it's interesting because they said it took them 12 years to produce 100 courses. They did 148 courses in 1 year. There was some backlash to that strategy, but I would put that aside. But some customers said, well, I want to speak with a human, I don't want to speak with a robot, but Duolingo did it. They did also an interesting thing. They created an online AI avatar. If you learn a language, you could speak to the avatar, but it's AI actually that learns from your ability, your skills, etc., and navigate with you. So that example of Duolingo shows that how you can use a knowledge base and create a systematized knowledge base. What we experience when we go in ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., is the knowledge base is really weak. In a sense, it's internet, Wikipedia at the best, or we don't know, or they steal it from content producers. But there's another field which is small language model, where you construct your own knowledge base. In theory and in practice, we could put all the medical knowledge in a knowledge base and systematize it and give to the learner a tool which is a new library, in a sense, where you don't have to go through every book and yourself create a synthesis, where you can talk to the synthesis itself. So that's another structure in terms of learning. It's not fixed, it's not static. We're not interacting with prefabricated knowledge, prefabricated learning event. We're interacting with a new way to systematize knowledge. And from a learning perspective, that is a very fundamental transformation in terms of structure, and it creates new practices, obviously. And what's interesting, it's not only text-based, it's multimodal. Some private businesses are even offering generative simulation AI, 3D. You prompt, you put the helmet, and you have a cinematic 3D realistic environment where you learn and practice. Even in primary school, there's those Greek history classes where you put the helmet and you're in ancient Greece. And so that's the first fundamental change, rethinking the way we systematize, modelize knowledge for the benefit of learning. And that's a very different proposition. For health professional, the basic idea, either from a subset of expertise or the whole medical knowledge or a specific medical knowledge, that means you could create a systematized knowledge base with all the knowledge, either like text-based, interview, video, audio, 3D object, and systematize it and offer to the learner not specific learning object, but a modelized learning base. And that's what the difference is. We could say a teacher, a well-experienced teacher, is as a human kind of a synthesis of a small language model, a human-based small language model. But you could not to go through large language model with a small language model, really offer to the learner a systematized, accessible. And I'll touch the second example later on, what it could mean for a learner in real time. The second example is kind of a consequences of that, not from the knowledge perspective, but from the learner perspective. And we see more and more what I could call self-regulated learning assisted by AI. You yourself, you want to learn, you interact with the knowledge base, you prompt the knowledge base. And an author really systematized and offered a product that he called AI-powered autonomous learning. They are in human resources. They did that exercise of creating a knowledge base of everything that was produced by their firm and the discipline on human resources, and created an avatar, a robot, where you interact in real time. And they refer to an example that might be more telling, that you could put all the documentation implicit in the production of a car, from safety, design, to the nuts and bolts, to the performance, etc., and create a learning resource. And what they did is they had to retrain the worker. Now they didn't have to ask for learning. They had the resource to interact with the knowledge base. So they retrained the learner to be able to prompt, to know what you don't know, to know what you want to know in a very specific way, in prompting engineering. And they even trained the worker to ask AI, how do you want the output? In PowerPoint, in video, in 3D, in whatever means of delivery that you prefer. You have to know yourself to be able also to ask AI. So it created more agency for the learner through prompting. And prompting engineering become a competency of a 21st century learner within an AI context. And it's even a learning experience, because through it, you create a relation to yourself. Do I really know what I don't know? Can I be precise in the question? And use and navigate through a large language or a small language model. An expression that I really like about prompting is you educate AI. So it's interesting from an adult educator perspective. You educate AI about what you need, because the model itself could answer differently the same questions if it's imprecise, ambiguous, if it's not well prompted. So a second emerging structure that we see, and it interacts with the first one, from a learning demand, the learner has more agency, but more responsibility. It relies on more skills of knowing yourself, and it translates into the skills of prompt engineering as a way to interact with knowledge base. And the example of the car industry is, as a worker, if you have a question, you just instantaneously take your phone, go to whatever the system, prompt, I want to know exactly that and and I want it in a PowerPoint, 5 slide, in 5 minutes reading. And please send me a little quiz just to make sure that I really know what I'm reading. I will answer the quiz and tell me if I get it or not. In 30 seconds, you could get the knowledge and go back to work, or never stop working, actually, through that process. I know there's a philosophy within neoliberal philosophy within never stopping working, etc., but that's not the topic of my conference. It's just the usefulness of the tool, how it's used, in which philosophy, in which business model. That's another question. So that means for health worker, you could be in the field, you're asking yourself a question, you're facing an event, you're facing an unknown behavior. You could prompt. You would have to know how to prompt in a specific disciplinary-based language, but you have dictionaries of every gesture in every profession. You would have to know how to prompt a small language-based, this disciplinary-based, and not hallucinating with the internet, and be able to instantly on your phone question. I need to do that now. You could even take your phone and film the situation instead of using vocal. That's multimedia way. You could put the phone there, open the audio, and just talk with somebody, and the AI would just get the input. And after that, to say, based on our conversation, I'm wondering this and that. What could be the way to do it? I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable, and get an answer. Not necessarily get the perfect answer. You have to be critical, even with a human teacher. You have to interact and re-question and make sure that everything is perfect. So that could be a very useful use, especially when there's ongoing change in rules and regulation. You could update the tool. If you want to test it by yourself, you could take ChatGPT or NotebookLM, where you enclose the database. It's not prompting, you're not prompting the internet, you're prompting specific. You could use just one document and test it. rules and regulation on this topic or that of WHO and test it, and you'll see, you'll get yourself into that dynamic of interacting with a knowledge base, the way we interact with a teacher, which is a human knowledge base. Third example about assessment. That's a very challenging field because assessing from a traditional perspective is really complex, creating the exam, etc., administrating the tool. But there's now a AI tool, and they're kind of vertiginous. And because they can assess in real time skills aware, not to mention the business itself, but the technology is able to scan hundreds of millions of job postings around the world every day. And they, through deep machine learning, they infer skill ontology, a skill set that means skills in demand through that source input, which is job posting. And they can also evaluate one person proficiency through interviewing, exam, videotaping the person, whatever multimedia input you have of the person. You could make a judgment, the AI could make a judgment on the conformity of the gesture or the knowledge compared to a knowledge base, but also compared to a framework. You could have a specific framework and say that person at that moment, etc. And it shrinks the time of evaluation to real time. That thing is just updating constantly as you feed the beast. It's constantly updating, and at the end, the last example would be how Microsoft, which has the luxury of having data about us, 80% of the humanity who's using Windows, saw an opportunity there and use that kind of technology. I'll come back to that later. So evaluation, assessment in real time. You could construct a tool if you have a framework, competency framework. If you have data, multimedia, multimodal support data about a learner's performance, interviewing video, like I said, you could analyze that per se compared to a small language model, a knowledge base, but you could also analyze that compared to a framework, a specific framework, even if it's changing. If you do from version A to version B of a framework, you could redo the process. If you have the data, you can just input it into the machine itself. So that's another example. And it creates, with the three basic functions of learning and adult, by four if we take into account learning content through LLM or SLM, a new system where you have your content, modelized, systematized in a small language model, ideally because it's disciplinary based, it's validated, and it's tested. The learning itself goes through the multi-modality of the learner receiving the content. The learning demand shapes itself through prompting. I want to know that. Instead of telling it to a teacher or an employer, etc., you interact, you express your demand to the large language model, and you have assessment. So that typical cycle that I could put traditional example instantiation of that learning content, the disciplinary field, learning in the classroom, learning demand, the learner says, I would like to the teacher, I would like to learn that. And there's an evaluation at the end of the class. That's the typical functions in our traditional setting. But AI allows that to do all those traditional functions, but in a very, not only having the potential to scale up or in a very, but also in a very instantaneous. And that'll be part of my conclusion. Our lifelong learning, we think time in life cycle. But to the direct topic of the conference, lifelong learning in the age of AI brings to the microsecond, the dynamic of lifelong learning. So the accumulation of seconds of learning. So it's a very fundamentally different topic. Fourth example, learning management system. We all know one basic learning management system is the school system, from primary school to graduate, etc. It's a learning management. We manage trajectory of learning in a multidisciplinary curriculum setting with teacher evaluation, etc. And you scale up along the way. That's a learning management system that didn't existed in the 4th, 5th century, especially was created in the 50s, 60s in a mass education learning management system. Coursera, which is one of the most prominent LMS, was for an innovation in itself when it appeared into a static LMS, a library of classes and customers for them, but learners that interact with it, select classes, etc. We call that the kind of the Netflix model. You pay one fee every year and you have access to a library of classes like you have access to movies. But it's what that first generation is what I call the Excel filter function. You just have a database, you filter according to your preference, and you get a close to what you could wish offering proposition. But now they're moved to AI, and it changes the logic completely because now they can have systematize their own knowledge base, their proprietary knowledge base, beyond offering a library of courses. They have coach, virtual tutor, assessment based on AI, etc. They offer the full package of the functionality you could do to AI. It's a private company, so there's a fee for the individual, but they have special package for businesses using AI. And some say that we're close to a situation where even the LMS, like I said at the beginning, will disappear. Because in a sense, if you interact through a generative AI interface and you can prompt a knowledge base, and if you have a profile and AI follows you for months, for years about your preference, where you are, etc., generative AI becomes an LMS. You don't need a platform. Your interaction with a knowledge base through the capacity of AI to collect data, to analyze pattern, etc., to make recommendation. And in a sense, generative AI could create a singular, unique learning pathway. No two humans would have the same one because no two humans would have the same configuration of data or identity would be modelized, learner's identity, preference, etc., advancement in knowledge would be modelized by AI. And it would become an LMS. So even if we might think that LMS are itself a challenging proposition to a traditional school system, they are themselves too close to disappearing as a tool. So it's not only the public sector who is really under pressure by generative AI, even AI. And we saw an example last year because a private publisher of school book, Chegg and Pearson, saw their sales dropped dramatically because people were transform ChatGPT into a school book generator and didn't pay $300, $500 for a psychology introduction book or whatever. So even themselves, they had to redesign themselves. And I'll tell an example with the last example. So we have now a system that's really complex, and all the basic learning dimension are there: content, learning, demand, outcomes, and management. But they're applied and operated by AI, and it totally transformed the speed, the maybe accuracy in terms of modelization, mathematization of learning, and reactivity and agency for the learner because the learner has that tool actually, has that system at its disposal. How can that be applied in a concrete life? That's where learning in the flow of work becomes a perspective, a model, a philosophy, where you bring the learning event to the learner in its workplace. And Microsoft understood that there was a business opportunity there. Not only because everybody's using Microsoft software, Teams, Word, Excel, etc., but they now have a specific suite of software for businesses that call Microsoft Viva Learning. And through that process, they were able to really make learning in the flow of work possible because people are using Microsoft system. So something that I didn't know, that Microsoft Graph is kind of a computerized every interaction we have with Microsoft product. And so deep learning can analyze that and create an appreciation of our skill set. And you could input different data about competencies that you want, etc., in the system. So what it does, two things in particular. First, if an employer has a specific project, three things. First, it's a competency profile of employee. Second, if an employer has a specific project asking for specific skills, could just input I need people who are proficient in those skills, and I have a list of individuals to mobilize, to regroup for that project. And the third one, they can bring the learning in the flow of work because it could appear to a team. I could be chatting with a colleague on team, and if I say, I don't really know how that thing works, I'm not really knowledgeable about this, I would get a pop-up. Would you like a 15-second video right there? And have a little quiz. And with Microsoft, what that giant organization is having is we might know or not know that Microsoft owns LinkedIn Learning. So there's a library of activity there. And a few months ago, Pearson, the school book publisher, realized that their sales were declining because they have static object and people were using generative AI. And so they had the content, specialized, validated academic content, and Microsoft had the AI plus the platform. So they did a partnership. So now when Microsoft would output suggestion of learning, it would be fed on Pearson database, which is a validated content, academic content. So now they're creating the capacity, the modelized knowledge through Pearson database, and also through the application, the channel that we use daily in our workplace, and with LinkedIn Learning and all the classes, etc., the way to answer one's learning needs in real time. And they also have Microsoft Mesh, which is a 3D proposition. It's not totally integrated yet with the learning content, but the programming is there. So that model that I see appearing where AI is used within lifelong learning in the flow of work, it's just a way to bring that full dynamic of accessing a knowledge base, prompting it, having it first, a validated small language model based on validated content in a specific discipline, workplace, etc. Not fishing the internet at large, which is very kind of dangerous, especially in health matter, I guess. And be able, training the worker into prompting, not only what you know, but also how you want the delivery of the answer in a video, audio, whatever the model itself, into your workplace when you need it. So I guess you could see already how it could be interesting for the field people, health professional in the field that could have an expertise, that could have specialized knowledge, but could face an unusual situation. So that model, what it allows to do, it's to bring lifelong learning in as a resources to the learner facing unknowns, even the unknown unknowns. Because what you would need to have as a prerequisite as a learner is to be able to face the unknown, know what you don't know, but you have the tool there to really extract knowledges. In conclusion, an example. Maybe some of you heard about Channel One. Channel One is a newscast with no human involved. AI just scanned actuality news around the world and create a written news bulletin. You select your avatar, the look of it, the language of it, and it's hyper realistic. That's an avatar actually. And you have your newscast, personalized newscast as you wish. That model could be the future within an AI perspective of lifelong learning. You could have in real time, you select your language, your avatar, you prompt, and you get a delivery as the super pedagogue, if you modelize pedagogy, and interact with knowledge. In conclusion, what I find important to think conceptually, to understand, it's not the technology that is kind of interesting in itself. We have now a new way to interface with knowledge, with the totality of knowledge, disciplinary base, or eventually the totality of knowledge being on a digital support, because there's more knowledge than what is on digital support. And that interfacing is multimodal. You can select the channel we want, but there's a prerequisite. It puts a lot of onus on the learner, but it creates a lot of potentiality of agency. And there's all those prerequisites. You need the money to have the subscription. You need you have to be literate. But even if you could interact orally and have oral products, so it could be a way to to adjust and adapt to less literate or illiterate person, as long as they're able to frame what they want. And we have a way now, and we used to think of lifelong learning in life cycle at different moments. At one point, we started to think about lifelong learning as a succession of learning event, the addition of learning, the cumulative effect of learning. That technology brings lifelong learning to a second. The real-time interaction with knowledge, appreciation of our skills, recommendation of learning, and have a quasi-organic interaction with a knowledge field right now in real time. That doesn't mean that all education will be shrink to that. Because personally, I think a blended, mixed learning, hybrid is the way to bring together different modality. Could have a learner start with watching a few videos. We put people together in a cohort-based structure in presence at one point. You'll have access to a virtual tutor at another point. We'll train you to prompt properly in your field, AI, validated knowledge, AI-based small language model will train you to prompt properly. You could be interacting. So we could now have the potentiality to create the full package, and not only learning event, but a learning environment, three-dimensional, multidimensional, multifunctional environment through what AI technology offers us. That would be as just sharing some thoughts. I guess we have some time for questions from the floor and from people online. Do you join me too?
Thanks so much, Daniel. Each time we learn so much from you and the knowledge that has been shared here through the different models. I think we are going to apply several of them. We are still at a phase where we are integrating the models, and this insights bring us to a phase where we are now thinking of different models. Especially this one at the end that you showed is such a revealing model where we can create the avatars and build on the content. Rather than being the presenter, there is already a lot of tools and techniques that are there. So thank you very much again. So we'll open the floor now for the online as well as in person here at the room. There are a few questions that have received before from the participants, but would like to first take the questions here from the room, and then we'll go online.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for the very informative presentation. Mindy Frost, Unit Head for Learning Design and Production at the Academy. You've spent the whole week with us learning more about how we're doing things, how we're trying to shift with new trends and so on. I'm wondering, given your presentation, what are your maybe top 2 recommendations for WHO Academy, where we're at right now as we're looking towards trying to meet the future demands of our unique learning audience? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say first, there's a change of paradigm involved in those tools that they're asking for. And I think that the prerequisites are the same and different. Quality training, quality content, the pedagogical relevant, a solution, taking the learner into account will be eternal, universal. But that tool lean on different premises. And part of the question that I want to answer is the theory of organizational transformation, because any organization need to be able to absorb that technology. My posture is you have 2 choices. You create the condition and to integrate the technology, or you integrate the technology that pushes you, or a mix of the 2. But that would be a choice. Personally, I picked the second one as a professional, as a researcher, etc. I jump into the technology, I forces it to push me just to see as a learner, experiential learning, where it would bring me. So in terms of more specifically the academy, I guess it's a perfect tool. It's a useful tool. You can modelize a specific knowledge based. You could create an avatar. You could create very well-formatted prompt. You don't prompt any, it's not an improvisation. We improvise prompting, but it's a metaphor, but it's really in a sense prompt engineering. But I think where it's not a metaphor, it's where cognitively you have to think really through. And that part is interesting because the birth of philosophy was asking the right question. And we come back to that, asking the right question to a knowledge base that was a wise person at that time, a philosopher, the first generation of philosopher. And right now it's to were a modelized knowledge base of their time. Now we do the same thing. And I find that really reassuring because beyond the technology, and that would be my message, is beyond the technology, there's a metacognition in that. As learner producer, as a learning designer, and it's a function that's been challenged by the automatization, etc. But not what AI is not able to do. It's the human learning project, and etc. Even with gamification, there's a lot of part of the technology that if some of you have interacted with Duolingo, it's a behavioral based way to attach you to the software. But it would be to do a pilot project, I guess. I've been using that word a lot, but it's a very progressive way to get into a field and use a knowledge-based design prompting. And you could make AI work only on a specific database and not the whole AI. And you could do it yourself with all those ChatGPT, etc., all those notebook LM. You can just turn off internet and have AI work on your knowledge base. You could put 50, 25, 50 documents there and just interacting with it, testing. But the most challenging part is prompting. Even if we prompt in a really naive and improvised way, it is challenging because you have to educate the model itself to answer what you need. But that's metacognition. That's not technology. It's the way to frame a question. I would test a small thing because it's not the technology itself that's hard. It's really intuitive. You ask a question. It's the cognitive part that's challenging. But that's a human part of the technology. That's where hope is. It's confronting us as human. It's not the machine who leads us.
Thank you for the inspirational questions. What comes to mind is the cultural revolution here for the learners from the inclusion perspective. When we have human facilitation in workshops, what we observe is that in some parts of the world, it is inappropriate to challenge, whether it is your peers, whether it is the authority of the facilitator. When you're working with AI, as your tutor, it is much easier to challenge. So we're talking about a global revolution in what learning and prompting might be, because you're now challenging an inorganic, non-human. And so that I expect will revolutionize the globalization of inclusion and the learning dimension.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a revolution, even a change of paradigm, but I like to use those words lightly because they might sound promotional, aspirational, more than descriptive. But the one perspective that I like is a year ago, an author coined the word co-intelligence. And the project is, if one day we're able to put the best of the human intelligence with the best of artificial intelligence together, we are somewhere else, even as a civilization, humanity, etc. And if we apply that to learning, we're lucky. I think, personally, I think we are in the most fascinating, innovative learning period of the human history, where we have hundreds, century experience of the school-based system from university in the Middle Ages, etc. We have peer-to-peer learning from the most ancient times of ancient times. We have family intergenerational learning, that was the medium at the beginning of humanity. We have now technology-based, etc. We have the full toolbox. And I think now it might seem we're automatizing or giving up our agency, but I think actually it puts pressure on us. If you're a learning designer now, there's no excuse. You have the full toolbox to create, to be creative, to design, to put together in presence, online, cohort-based, peer-to-peer, virtual theater, to just so there's no excuse to be traditional, plug and play. And so that, as a professional, to me, it's really inspirational because it brings the value added of you as a human. And not just I walk in a classroom, I am in the front and I deliver and I leave. Plug and play, the most traditional way of transferring. So I see it more as a change of paradigm. In the most classical of the term, Thomas Kuhn, you have an ongoing way of established answer to established problem, and suddenly there's an anomaly. There's a problem that you can't really answer. And now with technology, we have a new answer to problem. How can we answer in a very personalized, adapted way in real time learning and training? Beside of being in a shadowing situation, following the learner all his life, which would be a privilege to have a teacher, a wise person, in the ancient Greek way, or so many cultures, we have a wise person with you. Now there's a new answer to those problems. So when you have a new answer, you're just moving to a new paradigm. That's why I think we are in a new paradigm, because we have new answer that solves existing problems that were unserved by previous system. So it's just a synonym to revolution, but I would say that and to me, it's a different universe. My fear as a believer in the public-based education is it's a private market who's developing, who has the money, the research and development department, etc. It's not the public school, university, college, etc., who is at the forefront. And the thinking about innovative pedagogy using technology is in the private sector. And my fear is the public sector will be dependent of solutions offered by the private sector and lose the agency, lose the innovation. But that's more at the macro policy level, micro dynamic. My fear is there. They're developing really interesting thing, but you have to pay for it. And you don't own the development.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm here. In line with Jenny's comment regarding social interaction and the impact of human interaction into learning, this is very related to embodied cognition. So when we have to acquire skills, those skills should be embodied. It's all the theory of Francisco Varela or Barsalu, who wrote a lot on this. And AI is not organic. AI, meanwhile, regarding all the sensitive or the interaction with the human being is based on large language model, but it's not that interaction that brings something embodied to acquire skill acquisition. So this is one comment and question. How can we make it more embodied? Maybe through virtual reality, maybe through the interaction to make the body move when learning. This is one question, comment. And the second one is related to the recent paper that I haven't read, published last week, I think, by a researcher from MIT. They compared 3 groups of learners, one group using ChatGPT, second group using Google, and the third one not using any AI or internet-based research. And they recorded through EEG brain activity, and they demonstrated that using AI solely make learners laziest, and it has a negative impact on memory, on long-term memory retrieval. So what do you think about those 2 points, please?
The first one, I think there's the school of thought that said it's a really a mistake to try to create a humanized interface with AI. Could be like a block, a cube. Why to make it like a robot? Because us intuitively, we embodied the best interface that we know is another human. So they're using humanoid robot with artificial skins, with expression, etc. But that's an interface choice. It could be a cube, it could be just a voice, etc. So the embodiment of it, in terms of embodying the interface, is a questionable But it's viewed as the best way for human to learn because we interact with human, which is reassuring in a sense. The other part about laziness, etc., to me, I feel I might be old school, but I think I'll take an example. The problem with plagiarism at university with AI, it's not a technology problem. It's an intellectual rigor, cultural problem. If we're created a generation of people who are intellectually lazy, the technologies does the occasion that create that. But how come we're not able to create intellectual disciplines? It's like you could copy paste a book. I could steal your thoughts and make it like it's my own. It's not the technology that's the problem. The cultural, intellectual rigor. And I think in the debate with interfacing intellectually with AI and stealing or not, etc., yes, it's a problem, of course. But the deeper problem, the saddened problem for me is the weak intellectual culture that we're creating. And that's where we'll pay the price in the future to that, because we'll have missed a full generation of intellectual rigor. For all of us who went through a traditional school system, you have to learn, understand, etc., where we created an intellectual culture, and I'm sure we're not the one who are using freely stealing idea from AI or the other. So that would say that's the problem of laziness. It's not the tool itself. I mean, I won't have the time to just doing different personal experiment to challenge me intellectually with AI, not to do the work for me, but to push me to the limit of what I can know, and using AI as the driving force that brings me to the limit of my knowledge. So intellectually, it creates a posture toward knowledge. But I could easily, at the conference, they ask me to do a conference on a topic, just give me a script and read it to you. What's good doing that? Not for you, for me, intellectually. So to me, it's an intellectual cultural thing that we're losing through a generation. Maybe we'll use AI as a copy paste, stealing idea, looking good, and they won't be able to do the conversation. If I have them with me and we challenge them, we discuss, we're together in a community of practice, won't take long, we'll know that they don't know what they wrote about. It'll take maybe 50 minutes, 2-3 questions, and we'll reach the superficiality of copy pasting knowledge.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll go for the online participants. There are a lot of questions online. We'll take the first 3 questions as we have done here. So we have Rory. Hello, Rory. Can you hear us? Maybe I'll read out your question. So it's this question is, where is AI? Okay. Do you want to take the floor? Please go ahead. So where is AI at with the difficult issue of assessing competency behaviors in a competency-based approach? So more illustrating the place of AI.
Yeah, I think I'm not a specialist of all the way AI could assess, understand the logic, the potentiality. But what I understand is you could video somebody and have really a 360 video of them performing an act. And that's data for AI, whatever the support. AI is agnostic regarding the support. You could have testimony of the person, audio or video, whatever, and peer-based. So you could multiply the data point and use triangulation to try at best to capture if a person, to which level is a person proficient. And just in itself, it would be a better tool than an exam, which is one instrument. There's no triangulation. Maybe you're questioning kind of triangulate cross-index as a cross-indexing strategy. But that's what I find interesting with that tool. It's agnostic in terms of data. You could multiply data and you could multiply the modality of data. So if you add that, even if it's complex for us, it would be a complex accumulation of data point. And some say that all the knowledge on the internet is insufficient for AI. AI needs more data than that to be really proficient. So AI would analyze, and you could compare. That's what Duolingo is doing. If I'm a francophone, I'm a francophone from Canada, and I'm learning a language. all the data from the system will know all the problems or that Francophone from Canada have in learning German. So I would get special, I would pool my other compatriot proficiency into the algorithm who would answer me and propose me exercise that would be fit for a Francophone from Canada who's learning German. A Francophone from France, the north of France, south of France, etc., would pull a different data point. So the logic of it would be there, and people could test. You could film yourself doing something, upload it, and ask question. You would ask question to the video of yourself doing something. That would be the database. It could be a way to just familiarize yourself with the proficiency of the tool and at a really small scale. And after put 2 video, 5 video, put audios, and etc. I mean, some free plan allows you to put 25, 50 documents. So you could put 50 documents of yourself and just try it to assess yourself.
Thanks very much, Daniel. We'll take another question. So it's from Tong. Hello, Tong. I'll read out your question. So it's what challenges or ethical risk do you think AI will bring to the course designer?
Many ethical risks. MIT has an observatory of AI ethical risk or risk in general. I think they're up to 600 and something risk documented. So there's a lot of them. You have to be aware and really controlled. And the challenges, I would say, from an adult education learner perspective, it's to, a philosopher once said that the art of philosophy is to free of oneself. It's to unlearn and relearn learning and education, to be able to jump into a new world, not in a naive way, but as an educator way. You objectively observe the potential and you test it like any other tool. But as you probably felt, just the way time is compressed in a lifelong learning perspective with those tools is a challenge in itself. We don't have days, months to create. We don't have days, months to evaluate. We're not using 5 data, 1 in presence, 1 the test, etc. We could use thousands of data. So there's a jump there. It's more than a qualitative change, a quantitative change. I think it's a qualitative change. And so the educator has to put him or herself in the position of a learner in jumping into an unknown. But learning is always going toward the unknown by definition. So just to have a learning perspective toward the technology.
So true, so true. Last question from the online participation. It's from Anne. Hello, Anne, if you're hearing us. Her question is, if learning becomes part of everyday life, thanks to the system like Microsoft, I imagine that training events will diminish. The question now is, how can we keep the human side of learning in a group, and how will people integrate this learning time into their daily lives?
We still decide as an educator how to integrate and keep the human dimension at the forefront. It's to decide to do it and not be AI first, as Duolingo proposed. But at the same time, what I refer to the co-intelligence perspective, I find it interesting because you use the best of us as human and the best of the technology and design. But that's where I find that as transformed the function of learning design might become, the human decision would always be there. And if it's not there, I mean, one of the main regulation that all the member states of UNESCO or UNESCO itself is saying, keep human in the loop. So just keep human in the loop at one point and make sure. And to me, will bring, the beauty of it is I find that somehow technology allows us to bring back to the core, at the beginning of education, people sitting around a person. The beginning of university was collegium, was college, to be together, to regroup as professional around experts. And we'll come back to that. Technology will always be, I like at the beginning of online learning or internet, we would say learning assisted by internet or technology. I think we should say learning assisted by AI, not learning through AI, learning only by AI. But of course, AI allows the automatization of the full learning process trajectory. You could be alone by yourself and just travel. And we're still at first or second generation of AI. I have no idea in 10 years when I'll retire and I'll be old age looking at the technology. I have no idea. Nobody of us know, not even the developer, because they're saying emerging property. They thought that they were creating a machine that would do A, and suddenly they realized the machine does B. They never thought of that. So we're in a field where the machine itself is kind of creating something. But I would say it's the educator decision to keep human base, human first, human in the loop, and maybe part of it to leave it to AI, but within a more holistic, multifunctional, multidimensional learning environment.
Thanks very much, Daniel. As you rightly said, each one of us, human and the technology, we have the place. It's how we use it. So on this note, I would say that we are close to the time. Perhaps we can take just one last question from the room and then we close. So, Joanna.
I didn't want this to be the last question. It's a negative. Sorry. I'm a critical friend of AI, meaning I use it, but I do realize our maturity level is very low as a society, and we oversimplify things because it's currently a trend. I will give an example of last time I was in an AI forum. The only person that actually made the critical question on AI was an 18-year-old student. Everybody else in the room, which was professionals, very high-level people, were very much in awe. And the only person that said, but what about the ecological impact of AI, and gave statistics about how much power and water it consumes, FYI. That being said, I very much use it. You mentioned 10 years, Daniel, in your last thing, and I'm like, that's maybe could be 5 or 3 that we don't know what's happening. And I'm trying to listen to the big voices of AI, so technology, the industry that is behind all this, big money industry, by the way. So Jeffrey Hinton said that, who is like a tech guru, big person on AI, that basically, he's Canadian, by the way, so maybe you know, that white collar jobs are more than threatened. They will be reduced. You gave many examples of companies, Duolingo, basically, first they are getting rid of their human beings. So it might be not the human educator deciding after all, because they will not be in the picture to decide if it's AI first or AI supported, for example. And then he said, like, basically the jobs of the future and not like the short future are plumbers. So we are basically now educating the plumbers of the future. So where does that put us? Where does that put education, learning, and where does that also put the thought of maybe not the how, because the tools are being developed, but sometimes the why and the critical aspect of it, as the organizations that are currently doing either policy making or trying to protect human rights are usually 10 years behind technological advancement. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a good question to close it. It's the, I'd say first, for better or worse, we're a generation of people who lives in a transitory period. Most of us have experienced a traditional LMS school system, and many of you as professionals are facing the transform world of learning. But it's a transitory period, so we have to assume it. We have to know we'll make mistake, we'll find innovative solution, we'll correct, we'll adjust, etc. But we're not at the end point of le basculement or the other world. It's still in front of us. The first question, the first part of it, we have to assume that we'll make mistake. The other part, I mean, you're from the UN family, I'm also, but from the UNESCO family. And from a pedagogical, any tool should be justified from a pedagogical perspective, the use of any tool. That's kind of a premise, a UNESCO premise within the education part of it, and should be controlled by human. We should not be controlled by. So that's a principle, but it's also a management, a principle of management of the technology. And at the smallest scale as possible, any educator would use AI. If I was one of the member of the cohort, I would raise my hand and know, why did you pick that tool, for which pedagogical reason, and what outcome? To know if the learning designer had an idea or just used it because you do it now. As an example, I didn't do it, but what I wanted to do, I'll do it at a conference one day. I could have put my phone here and open ChatGPT audio and add it as a co-panelist and talk to it and answer questions and just see where we would lead us. And once in a while, challenge us. I will prompt live orally, challenge us, bring us. We're afraid of this. We think of that. We have a limit. Just get in the conversation. We could do that. It would just be grateful, whatever it is, grateful. The algorithm will jump into our conversation and bring us somewhere. That's kind of the experiment I'm doing sometime. I'm using it as a way not to agree with me, because you could prompt controversially, ask, tell me the counter-argument of my thought, challenge me, push me to the limit, try to figure out what do I don't know on that topic. And that would be a tool. I would say I'm using it because I want us to be challenged. That's the idea. I want us to go somewhere where none of us would think, not even me. And I have a live dimension, an unknown live dimension to the discussion would just lead us. I've never did it, I've never done it yet, but I'm really tempted at one point to do it, because even as a speaker, I would have no idea of the end result. And as a learner, learning is to go toward the unknown by definition. You don't learn what you know, you learn what you don't know. And just to create the space pedagogically of having the unknown with us, that could be interesting as an experiment.
Thank you, Daniel. So now we'll close the seminar. I want to take the opportunity really to thank you for your time, the knowledge that you bring to us. There are a lot of questions still remain unanswered. So we'll come back to you with those questions to get your feedback. And for the online participants, thank you very much for your participation, the on-site participants as well. We'll be sharing all the material. We'll be sharing also the video. We would perhaps also translate it into the Spanish language for the better dissemination. And we'll send out everything by mail. So thank you again. David, would you like to do the closing? Okay, Daniel, last words and then we can close.
I mean, whatever the technology, where learner and educator trusts, everybody should trust their gut feeling as learner and educator and use the technology. As we use other colleagues, as we use knowledge, as we use a book, etc., and think that what we're experiencing now, think what they experienced when the written word was printed in the 16th century, how it revolutionized the way to support knowledge, to transfer knowledge, to systematize knowledge. We're having some kind of a same kind of event. We have way to support knowledge, to transfer knowledge, and systematize knowledge. So it's interesting, at different moment in the human history, there's a revolution in the way to systematize knowledge, the way to access knowledge. And the written word printing created a lot of indexing, etc., a lot of way to systematize knowledge. We have a tool now that does the same thing. So we should be as exploratory with it as people were with the printed written word in the 16th century and way before in some other civilization. Thank you.